There are a lot of people that love JRPGs, but a lot of them haven't tried the Trails series, and I can understand why. It isn't because they aren't amazing games, because they are, and it isn't because they don't want to try them necessarily, because a lot of people do. But the reality is, it feels like a big commitment. These aren't small games. Each game in the series comes to the better part of 60 hours, depending on how much of the side content you want to do. Sometimes way more than that. It could be 60 to 100 hours. And when that series happens to have a trilogy, a duology, and a quadrology, that's a lot of game to play through in order to feel like you're all caught up. There are a lot of people who insist you need to play through all of them in order, which I understand. There's a lot you can get out of the series if you play through the entire thing. Characters that jump back and forth between the different series, timelines that the games follow, not just for characters, not for the main story, but also for the world as a whole, since each game takes place on the same continent. But I don't necessarily see it the same way as a lot of those people. There are some games you just don't necessarily find yourself drawn to for one reason or another. That comes down to a lot of different things, like it could be an art style you don't like, or central theme you don't find that interesting, or any number of reasons. Maybe you don't like the protagonist. The same is just as true for a big series like Trails as it is for any other piece of media. And that's why I think it's perfectly fine to start wherever you would like, and to play only the parts of the series that you think you'll enjoy. So if you like Trails in the Sky, but you don't necessarily like Cold Steel, it's perfectly fine. If you didn't like Trails in the Sky or Cold Steel, but you like the premise of Trails Through Daybreak, perfectly legitimate. In fact, with Trails Through Daybreak coming out, there isn't a better time to jump into the Trails series. Trails Through Daybreak is a different tone than some of the other games, and it makes that pretty clear straight from the beginning. This isn't some do-gooder, straight-laced sort of protagonist that we've had in a lot of the Trails series, though they all have their moments, to be fair. Trails Through Daybreak actually fits a lot more into the mold of the kind of character that Western audiences like, probably more so than any other Trails game up to this point. It's reflected in the review scores too, so with Trails Through Daybreak being the best overall review scores that we've seen from any of the games in the series, with an 87 overall score on OpenCritic, puts it right up there with a game like Unicorn Overlord. Part of the reason that Trails Through Daybreak has been such a big hit with Western reviewers, and will probably be with the general Western audience as a whole, is the addition of more choice to your playthrough. You're no longer strapped to a specific path with no choice of where you end up at all. Which isn't to say it's open world or non-linear or anything like that, but it does have interesting choices that allow you to go and put your own touches on how things happen. It plays out through side quests when you're allowed to decide what to do. There's even an alignment system that plays out as you're making these choices. You can be a more lawful character, or a little bit more chaotic, or travel the road in between, bring a little gray into the world. That sort of character works way better for me, personally. I didn't like that I was forced to be a paragon of virtue in a lot of the Trails games. There's something more interesting about taking the middle path, letting things play out in different ways depending on whatever my whim is at the time. Depending on the sum of those choices, different things can happen in the story, and you can become aligned with different groups. It's a cool system. Adds an entire new layer to the game, something that Trails needed, I think, and something that players that are new to the series will likely appreciate. So that is to say, this is a perfect game to come into for people that are new. And this particular part of the series is broken up into at least 3 confirmed parts, so you'll be following Van Arkwright and his little party for a while. The combat has become a lot smoother as well, so you'll immediately notice the difference when you boot up the game and go into the first dungeon. Animations are faster, you can speed them up. Moving your chosen abilities to the path that you want has a nice upgrade to it, making it easier and faster to use. So let's say if you have a cone that you're trying to hit a couple different characters with, that's way easier to do in Trails Through Daybreak than it was in older games. On top of that, you can play through the smaller battles with the action combat system, swapping back and forth from turn-based to action however you want, something that is brand new. The great thing is, if you prefer a female protagonist, you can jump into Trails in the Sky. If you like the idea of a virtuous character who fights for his friends, you can check out Trails of Cold Steel. If you prefer the Yakuza style of watching a single area change and grow over time, you can play Trails from Zero. There are so many different options depending on what you're interested in, and any one of them is a decent jumping on point. Though for me, the best is either Trails in the Sky or Trails through Daybreak. But you're really spoiled for choice now. My best advice would be to choose whatever part you're most interested in and go for it. Trails is one of the best JRPG franchises out there, and this is easily the best time to get started. Thanks for watching.